After an endless series of replaced directors and showrunners, multiple delays for the COVID pandemic, the 2023 strikes, and countless creative changes, Dune Prophecy is finally here. Set roughly 10,000 years before Denis Villeneuve's Dune films, this series aims to explore the perilous events that led to the world we see in the Imperium of Paul Atreides' time. There's just one big issue. None of the events of this show are based on Frank Herbert's books. Let me explain. In the literary world, the Dune canon has been undeniably fractured for many decades. For those not aware, Dune was originally conceived as a massive tome, similar to copies of The Lord of the Rings you can find on store shelves today. However, Frank Herbert's publisher made him break up the story, resulting in the original narrative splitting into 3 books: Dune, Dune Messiah, and Children of Dune. In a sense, these 3 novels represent the complete Dune story as originally envisioned by Frank. Then, in 1981, he wrote God Emperor of Dune, set 3,500 years after the events of the original trilogy, and serving less as its own story and more as an epilogue for the entire series, looking back on the events of Paul Atreides' time as historical record. This is the best place to stop reading if you're looking for a complete narrative with a beginning, middle, and end, and a summary making sure you got the important points. But after God Emperor of Dune was published, something cool happened. In 1984, Dr. Willis E. McNally, a close friend of Herbert's and a professor of literature at California State University, penned a new addition to the Dune universe. Set 1,800 years after the end of God Emperor, the Dune Encyclopedia was framed as an in-universe document, using recent archaeological finds to reconstruct details of the past. As such, much of the book was deliberately written to misinterpret events and technology from the original Dune novels. By the time the Dune Encyclopedia was written in-universe, society had more or less become a biopunk dystopia, with biology coming to fill the role of a significant amount of daily technology. The Dune Encyclopedia was written so faithfully to Frank's original voice that it often feels like it was written by the man himself. This work is so good at preserving and enhancing Frank Herbert's original series that many fans consider it an essential part of the reading experience. A Dune 4.5 of sorts. But Frank didn't stop writing there. 2 more books followed, beginning a new story set so far in the future that almost nothing was recognizable. Many of the facts set to writing in the Dune Encyclopedia were ignored for these sequels, but that only served to further enhance the in-universe framing device of a flawed historical document. In 1986, Frank Herbert passed away at age 65 from a pulmonary embolism, having written 6 Dune books, and concluding the final book with an open ending that teased more to come. That, of course, would not happen. Then, in 1999, Frank Herbert's son, Brian Herbert, would release Dune, House Atreides, a direct prequel to the original Dune. Fans were ecstatic there would be new Dune books to read, but when they opened the book, what they found, while competently written, paled in comparison to the deep writing of Frank's works. Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson would collectively write 17 expanded Dune novels as of the publication of this video. I didn't realize until getting a hold of my own copy of the Dune Encyclopedia that what it presents is so radically different from Brian Herbert's work, there really is no way to reconcile the two. Finally getting my hands on the encyclopedia was a dream. Reading it for the first time felt like discovering a long-lost 7th Dune novel written by Herbert himself. And now that I've had time to pore over it in detail, it's clear that the different timelines cannot be reconciled in the way I was hoping. So much of what Frank Herbert and Willis McNally put to writing directly contradicts scenarios that Brian Herbert and Kevin J. Anderson describe. For example, in the expanded Dune timeline, the Holtzman effect, the technology that enables non-relativistic space travel, was invented by Norma Senva, a brilliant but socially ostracized character who, thanks to her breakthrough invention, becomes the first prototype guild navigator and one of the most powerful characters in the whole of human history, as the immortal oracle of the Spacing Guild. In Brian's prequel novels, her work is plagiarized and stolen by her research partner, Theo Holtzman, who names the Holtzman effect after himself. But in the Dune Encyclopedia, Ibrahim von Holtzman was a young ornithopter racer who suffered a nearly fatal crash, and had what was left of his body transplanted into a cybernetic housing. In that form, He learned to process thoughts faster than even the smartest human, escaped from the hospital he was stuck in by transferring his mind to a custom-built spaceship that doubled as a cybernetic body, and launched himself into a far-flung orbit around his home star system that would allow him to drift in the void while contemplating advancements in the suspensor nullification effect, returning to his departure point once every 1,862 years to announce his discoveries to humanity. During his fifth pass, the Butlerians were waging their campaign against computers and advanced artificial intelligences. Holtzman was declared a thinking machine and destroyed. So yeah, not quite the same character, and the two differing stories are not really compatible in any way. Because of all this, the Dune universe is typically divided into three canons: Frank's original six novels plus the Dune Encyclopedia, and then the expanded Dune universe of Frank's original novels plus his son's books, with his son's books overwriting his pre-existing lore. So, all of that out of the way, let's finally return to Dune Prophecy. As of the publication of this video, the very short first season is only half complete, so I thought this would give us a fun opportunity to discuss what's been released so far, and plant some theories about where the final 3 episodes might take us. From this point on, spoilers ahead for the episodes released so far. Dune Prophecy follows the story of sisters Valia and Tula Harkonnen, as Valia tries to plant a Bene Gesserit on the Golden Lion throne, struggling to manage her loyalties between her Harkonnen blood and the Bene Gesserit sisterhood. When a wedding between House Richese and the Imperial House Corino allows the sisterhood an opportunity to get one of their own on the throne, Valia becomes involved in the arrangement, placing herself at the heart of palace intrigue as she maneuvers the right powers to get what she wants, and determine if what she wants is the ascendancy of the sisterhood or the ascendancy of House Harkonnen. Along the way, a conspiracy is revealed that centers on the new character of Desmond Hart, who appears to have miraculously returned from the dead after being devoured by a sandworm, granted extraordinary, terrifying powers in the process. As a high-level overview, I'll say that this show is very watchable, but it nowhere near achieves the depths of soulful storytelling accomplished by Denis Villeneuve in his groundbreaking blockbusters. The special effects are fantastic. It looks and feels as good as some of the best science fiction available today. The sets are just as impressive as those used for the films, and the technology of the show looks and feels perfect. Ships, shields, suspensors, scanners, lasguns, all are faithful to the world both Frank Herbert and Denis Villeneuve established. The sound effects are likewise great, matching the work of Richard King from the mainline films in all but a few key instances, which I'll touch on in a moment. The acting is all good or passable. These are definitely professionals at the top of their game, giving it a serious effort. The soundtrack, however, is nowhere near Hans Zimmer's, and at times feels less like Dune and more like Game of Thrones. But okay, let's dive into the first 3 episodes themselves. If there's one thing that can be said without any doubt, it's that this is definitely a Brian Herbert production. From the very first shot, a strong statement is made when we're immediately given apocalyptic death robots, telepathic space witches, and quote-unquote foundational characters for this world that Frank Herbert had no hand in creating. Starting the show with an opening shot of the Machine Crusade was a bold choice considering the tentative state of the franchise's canon, but one that I was still somewhat impressed by. The Machine Crusade is a critical piece of Dune lore that is essential to understanding the state of the world we see in Paul Atreides' story, and it's one that, for whatever reason, Denis Villeneuve did not include in his feature film, and only discussed in interviews and behind-the-scenes footage.
The thing that I deeply love, the idea that we are dealing here with a science fiction world where there's no computers.
It's important to note here that the Butlerian Jihad, as Frank Herbert envisioned it, was not just a war against machines. There were robots, certainly, and robots were used in conflict against humans. But the Butlerian Jihad was as much a revolt against oppressive robotic overlords as it was against the psychological crutches of computers and artificial intelligences that assisted humans and stifled our creative thinking. There's nothing inherently wrong with saying that the Dune universe was born out of a Terminator-style war against the machines. But it's also important to demonstrate that it was a war against things that, in our present time, would fall under the category of corporate servers and personal computers. The Butlerians weren't just out to destroy your robots. They wanted to destroy your smartphone, your tablet, and your modem as well. It was about returning humanity to a state where all we could rely on was our own intellectual power. Now, it's typically a bad idea to start a story with this much raw exposition. From the moment you hit play, Valia Harkonnen spends 3 minutes giving you the backstory of the show before the story even starts. That's a long time to leave a new viewer waiting, and a lot to throw at them up front. But once the story does begin, we're immediately greeted with telepathic women, causing water to vibrate from their combined mental power. Now, Frank Herbert was pretty explicit about this. The Bene Gesserit sisters are not supposed to be literal psychics. In Dune, when Jessica is communing with the Fremen Reverend Mother during their spice ritual, he explicitly says that their connection was not telepathy, but a mutual awareness. Later, in Children of Dune, Jessica doubles down on this. No, I don't read minds. I read the face, the body, the mannerisms, tone of voice, set of arms. Anyone can do this once they learn the Bene Gesserit way. The vibrating water was unnecessary and gimmicky, and distracts from the actual point of Bene Gesserit training, cheapening Herbert's original conception into something akin to fairy tale witches. Which leads into possibly the worst part of this show, which is the voice. The creators here clearly did not understand the voice. I was never particularly fond of the way the voice is used in Villeneuve's movies. The audio design does a fantastic job of making clear the audio is heard from the perspective of one on whom the voice is being used.
Come here, kneel.
But I knew that someone would eventually come along and interpret it, as they have in the past, as just magic yelling.
Then take out your blade!
But that's not the voice at all. It encompasses a full range of tone and volume, and I always perceived it as being more effective when done subtly. In fact, the first time we're introduced to the voice in Dune, Paul only catches that it's happening thanks to his Bene Gesserit and Mentat training, making it clear that this is something most people don't even notice happening to them.
He's using the voice.
In fact, my favorite rendition of the voice on screen so far is the seduction scene between Feyd-Rautha and Lady Margot Fenring in Part 2. As the effect is subtle.
You're not taking part in your own celebrations.
And it's clear Feyd isn't entirely aware of what's happening to him. So the whole magic yelling thing is based on a misinterpretation of the source material, and is the one example of what I would hesitantly call bad sound design in this show so far.
Take out your blade!
These portrayals stray so far from Frank Herbert's intended examples of enhanced human potential, and cross into the realm of superhero fantasy in a way that would feel more at home in an X-Men film than in the Dune universe.
Pick up the knife!
I'm also not sure why Valia can only think of the one thing to compel people to do. All that said, the operations of the Sisterhood are definitely the most compelling part of the show. Watching Tula instruct a class on truth sense was probably the most Frank Herbert-like scene in the entire episode.
Human beings rely on lies to survive. We lie to our enemies. We lie to our friends. We lie to ourselves.
And seeing the Bene Gesserit acolytes studying in a great library filled with conventional books felt very Dune. In fact, all the set dressing is fantastic, none of it feeling out of place for the world Herbert envisioned. Once again, it's worth saying that the look and feel of this show is very much on brand. But that's not the case with the writing. Later in the episode, after the wedding between the Bene Gesserit-trained Corino princess and the young Pruitt Richese, it is revealed that the Richese family has ignored the ban on thinking machines. This is the one scene that I felt was missing from Villeneuve's film, where we get to see the emotional weight people still carry as a result of the Machine Crusade.
That technology is forbidden!
Frankly, the training mech scene was already in the novel, and could have been added to the movie with minimal effort. Just have Paul fighting against the mech when Gurney enters, instead of the training dummies.
Don't stand with your back to the door.
And have their conversation include a little bit of exposition about the line between permitted clockwork machinery and forbidden computers, before continuing with the dialogue and training that appeared in the final film. But instead of getting that in the Villeneuve movie, we got it here. However, the way it played out made it seem like the threat was advanced robots, not computers. The scene would have been far more impactful and descriptive if the boy had caused a panic for pulling out a computer tablet. And finally, we get to a scene that caused a little bit of controversy within the Dune community, the nightclub scene. While there is certainly room for the Dune universe to have bars and a vibrant nightlife, this scene felt so out of place in a post-technological feudal society. But it probably could have been fixed with some more set design work to get it to match Dune's aesthetic, and better music more in line with Dune's psychedelia, making it feel a little more exotic and multicultural instead of like a nightclub you'd expect to see in a Blade movie. Except if we're being honest, even Blade has better techno than this. Moving on to episode 2, we're once again given some great special effects shots. And it's reinforced to me that one of the biggest things separating this show from Villeneuve's films is not just the writing, but the pacing. There are moments when the show slows down to let you soak in the ambience, and that is when it feels the most like Dune. That said, the operations of the Sisterhood are definitely the most compelling part of the show.
Remember your practice. Step outside your body.
And the majority of the time remain faithful to Frank's vision.
Allow your awareness to extend to your nerves, to the flow of your blood. Good.
Now, oddly enough, episode 3 really worked for me. It seems that when the show is willing to veer away from firmly establishing Brian Herbert's lore and just focus on telling a good story, everything really comes together. In this episode, we get to see the backstory of Tula and Valia Harkonnen, and for the first time on screen get to see the Harkonnen and Atreides feud, outside of the immediate families of the Baron Harkonnen and Paul Atreides. The voice continues to be an issue, but everything else was really fantastic. Getting to see a Seleucid bull in the wild was also amazing, and I really appreciated the grounded design with just some accents that gave it a slightly alien feel. The revelation that the Sisterhood possesses outlawed thinking machine technology is without a doubt going to tie into the other ongoing mystery of the show, which is the identity of Desmond Hart. The original character of Desmond Hart has been set up as the overarching mystery of Season 1, but it seems pretty obvious to me, having read Brian Herbert's earlier books, that Desmond Hart is going to turn out to be Erasmus. I think that Brian is trying to use this show to introduce some intrigue around the identity of Erasmus, and then go back and retell the events of the Machine Crusade in a second show, allowing him to bring his conclusion of the Dune saga to the big screen with proper setup. If he doesn't turn out to be Erasmus himself, then I think Desmond definitely had a first-hand encounter with the thinking machine. The fact that Desmond keeps touching the temple near his eye, and keeps talking about how he lost his eye to Shai Hulud, tells me that he might have been gifted some sort of cybernetic implant by the hiding machines. So, those are my thoughts on the first half of Dune Prophecy, Season 1. On a surface level, I am enjoying getting to see more of the Dune universe, even if the writing and world building isn't quite what I would want. I enjoyed reading Brian and Kevin's books when I was younger, so I know there is value there. It's just that as I've gotten older, I've gravitated towards stories that contain deeper meaning. To me, only Frank Herbert's Dune novels accomplish this. I'm not mad that the prequel books exist. I only wish that the fractured state of Dune's lore had remained in the books and hadn't been carried over into the film universe. Because now, fans of the films are going to be just as split about what does and doesn't count as official lore. For me, it's clear that any show based on Brian Herbert's works will remain semi-canon, existing as complementary lore alongside Frank's original stories except where they contradict what he set down in writing. But what do you think? If you're just learning about Dune for the first time through this cinematic universe, how does it feel going from Villeneuve's movies to this? Could you tell the difference? If you're a longtime Dune fan and you've read the encyclopedia, let me know what parts of Dune lore you think were better told by Willis McNally. Let's have a discussion and see how this series is landing for wider audiences. With that said, thank you so much for watching. We'll see you in the next video.